Welcome to The Alternative Investor. I'm Nastasia Aronsa. The world stands poised on the brink of the fourth industrial revolution. Rapid advances in a host of technologies, including AI, 3D printing, robotics, big data, and data science are combining to alter almost every profession and every industry in potentially radical ways. If you're concerned about robots, then we're going to tell you how you can exactly own some of those robots. So I spoke to Mic Mann, who's the CEO of Mann Made Media, about the developments in the fourth industrial revolution. Have a look. What sets the fourth industrial revolution apart from its predecessors is both its speed and its breadth. Unlike most previous industrial revolutions, this one isn't just about manufacturing or automating repetitive rote tasks. Instead, this fourth industrial revolution is also transforming services and professions. How would you frame the current conversations around the fourth industrial revolution right now?
The first thing I would say is that the fourth industrial revolution was getting a lot of exposure, and a lot of the conversations were around the fourth industrial revolution, as we saw at the World Economic Forum last year. And I think now, because of what's happened, the conversation has never been more important than now, because we're seeing this rapid virtualization, this digitization that is happening across all sectors and across all industries. We have to, people that said that they didn't need to embrace technology or didn't need to embrace the virtual world before, have now been sort of launched into that world, and they have to experience it. So that, like, if you were an old employee saying, I'm going to retire never trying Teams or Zoom, you've had to dispel that myth and really get into it.
We've been talking about how labor markets will continue to change as new technologies come on stream. From your perspective, what are some of the skill sets that young people should be building right now as these technologies continue to advance?
I think one of the biggest things is that we need to realize we can access this new global economy out there. How do the young people and the youth start embracing platforms, start embracing gaming, new ways of live streaming? These are the jobs of the future. How do we access this global market that can really help create jobs for our youth, as well as create huge wealth? Because there's a huge market in the live streaming world. If you're a live streamer on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, you could be earning a lot of money. And that was never a job before, and now it is a job. And we need to start looking at what can we teach the youth around online platforms so that they can embrace these platforms and start working in these platforms, as well as gaming. Gaming is probably going to be one of the biggest industries of the future.
Well, the Signia Fourth Industrial Revolution Global Equity Fund is the first product of its kind in South Africa. It offers local investors exposure to global companies at the forefront of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which sees new technologies merging the physical, digital, and biological worlds at an exponential pace. I spoke to Magda Vezishka, who is the CEO of Signia Asset Management, about the fund. Let's talk about, I suppose let's take it back to 2016 when the fund was launched. What was the initial response from the market and investors?
So, hi everyone. The Signia Fourth Industrial Revolution Global Equity Fund, as a result of the fact that, I went to San Francisco and I attended a bit of a futurist conference at Singularity University. And I was exposed to all these trends of the future, everything from self-driving cars, virtual reality, robotics, just virtualization of the world and the way that technology will change the world. And, having listened and looked, it was an absolute no-brainer to say we have to launch a product which invests into these themes because this is the future. And, at the time, people were fascinated. And in fact, the reception from investors was incredibly positive, and we had a lot of interest. What was funny was the reaction from other asset managers. So other asset managers looked at us and said, oh, it's a ridiculous fund. These themes will never take off. And I just thought, the world is so small in South Africa and the mindset is so narrow. You guys have no idea what's happening worldwide. So that really was the origination of the fund. And of course, it's proved to be a fantastic investment and, incredibly popular and continues to grow in popularity.
Magda, at the time, were there any other asset managers who had a fund similar to what you were thinking at the time?
There was absolutely nothing like that in the market. So I looked around the world, and again, there was absolutely nothing. And, in order to help us in research, because obviously we now needed to find the companies, particularly in the US, that concentrated on research and development and production of, these kind of themes. And it also included things like, virtual education. It included healthcare and innovation in healthcare. So we partnered with a company, which at that stage was a startup called Kensho. And they did a lot of the kind of background fundamental research into the companies in the US on our behalf. And Kensho subsequently, about a year ago, was sold to S&P for $700 million in valuation. But when we met them, they really were a startup. And, we've got the exclusive rights to use them as a partner in running this fund. So no, there was absolutely nothing like that around, not here and not worldwide.
All right, so let's talk about the companies that make up, this niche fund. What can you share with us about those particular companies?
So some of the companies, and maybe the more interesting ones, obviously there's a little bit of exposure to companies such as, and I'll explain why, such as Apple and Microsoft and Google, just because those are well-known names. And the reason, we have exposure to those companies in particular is that what people don't know is that behind the scenes, those companies are busy gobbling up absolutely every single startup that is showing promise in the field of technology, which actually has nothing to do with their core business model as you know them. Amazon is another one. Nothing to do with, selling online, but everything to do, for instance, with digital healthcare provision. So they are preparing for the future, and we want to be on that journey with them. Another share, which is absolutely fascinating, which we've added to the portfolio recently, was a share in a company called Oxford Sciences Innovation, and that was last year. And it's a company which is effectively a joint venture between some asset managers. Signia is now the largest shareholder in this company, and Oxford University. And basically, it's an exclusive relationship which commercializes all IP, which emerges out of Oxford University. And of course, the best known example of that IP is the Oxford Vaccine Project. And through Oxford Sciences Innovation and through Signia Fourth Industrial Revolution, you actually have exposure to everything that you're reading about in the press at the moment. So it's Oxford Sciences Innovation has share in a spin-out company out of Oxford, which is at the leading edge of the vaccine development. And I just read in the Business Day this morning that South Africa is being used as one of the testing sites for the vaccine itself. Brazil, UK, US, and South Africa. So, just to bring it a little bit closer to home, you would have exposure to that vaccine product development through the Signia Fourth Industrial Revolution Fund.
So this particular fund, who is it aimed at, and what's the risk profile here?
It's a global equity fund, but it's a very widely diversified fund. So it holds over 150 different shares. And consequently, as an equity fund, it's always high risk. So every single equity fund you buy is in a higher risk or growth category. But really, it's targeted at absolutely everybody. It's 100% offshore, so there are no South African companies in that fund. So it gives you also exposure to, obviously, the currency fluctuation. And if the rand weakens, the fund does well. If the rand strengthens, then that detracts from the returns. But the fund is targeted at absolutely everybody. You can have it in your portfolio. If you have equities and global equities in your portfolio, you should have some exposure to Fourth Industrial Revolution Fund. If you are a 25-year-old with kind of, 40-year time horizon till you retire and want to do things differently, then you can actually have quite a significant exposure to this fund. It's not a niche offering. It's actually, as far as we're concerned, a core offering in the global equity space.
That's it from me. We'll have more news with my colleague Nompumelelo Siziba at the top of the hour, and your weather details are up next. So goodbye for me.